everyone, I'm Calluna, and welcome back to another Game of Thrones episode breakdown. Oh boy, this episode is going to be tough for me to talk about. While there were a lot of cool moments overall, this is probably one of the worst written episodes in all of Game of Thrones, like on par with Season 5 Dorne stupid. I think this episode's problem is that it defies logic one too many times to the point where I no longer was enjoying what I was watching. And for a penultimate episode, I really wasn't blown away. The big high points, unfortunately, were predicted a while ago, and then when we finally saw them, it just sort of takes away the fun. Well, with that glowing review, let's get started on Season 7, Episode 6, Beyond the Wall. What a fucking creative title. Okay, so since the episode only takes place with two major storylines going back and forth, I'm just going to focus on everything that happens in one, then the other, rather than my usual chronological route. I will say, though, this back and forth style they did was not something I was fond of. Previous penultimate episodes, like the Red Wedding, were much more effective at creating suspense and tension for what ultimately happens. Here, the constant cutting back to more walking? Yeah, not very good, you guys. Might have helped if you had more than just these two scenes to go with. So, let's start with what is obviously less important to the writers. Winterfell. Arya and Sansa are overlooking the Winterfell courtyard, and we actually get this tender moment between the two of them, as Arya tells a story about how she snuck out and trained with a bow when no one was looking, only to have Ned clap for her when she finally made the shot. Well, I hope you enjoyed those 2 minutes of tenderness, because that's all we get before Arya begins accusing Sansa of being a traitor to the family, bringing out the letter Sansa wrote to Robb and reading it in front of her. Sansa explains she was forced to write the letter, and she did it because she thought it was how she could save her father. Arya belittles Sansa, telling her she would have died before betraying her family. The two of them get into an argument, each throwing each other's weaknesses in each other's faces. Arya's anger seems to draw from jealousy, almost. She references how Septa Mordane would smack her knuckles because her handwriting wasn't as nice as Sansa's. She mentions how Sansa always was inside knitting, and how Sansa looked all pretty with her nice hair and dress when Ned was executed. Sansa doesn't escape from the bad writing, though. She contradicts her previous statements by saying she was the one responsible for winning the Battle of the Bastards since she brought the Vale army, which I mentioned last season was really poor writing to create tension. And she even says Arya wouldn't have survived what she went through. Here's the thing, she's partially right on that. Arya would have lost her head if she had been taken to Cersei or Joffrey, but Arya's struggles were something Sansa also wouldn't have survived due to her delicate nature. Both girls suffered, and rather than bringing these two together, they are justifying their pain by disregarding the others. The scene ends with Arya being creepy again as she tries to read Sansa's emotions, realizing Sansa is afraid of what will happen if the Northern Lords see the letter. She then just walks out of the scene to leave Sansa to worry about what she's going to do. So, despite saying to Bran and Arya how much they totally shouldn't trust Littlefinger, Sansa goes to him to talk about Arya and the letter, presumably because she remembers he was there when she wrote it. I mean, wow, really, Sansa? She basically uses him to vent her frustrations. She doesn't know how Arya found the letter, the Northern Lords are fickle and she's worried they're gonna leave at any moment, and Jon hasn't written to her in weeks. We get no other confirmation from her about other letters, so presumably he spent all that time on Dragonstone without messaging Sansa despite the letter he got from Wolken? Really? Jon honestly didn't take the time to consider messaging Sansa when he was forced to stay, when he got permission to get the dragon glass, or when he decided to leave for Eastwatch? What the hell? Baelish tries to convince Sansa that Arya wouldn't hurt her family, though Sansa doesn't believe that. She's become too paranoid and mistrusting, and Arya has become so different from what she remembered that she's afraid of her. Littlefinger finally mentions that Brienne would intercede if the girls tried to harm each other, which Sansa agrees with. Okay, so what is Littlefinger's motive here? Did he do all this just to have Sansa come crawling back to him for advice? Well, congrats on that, I guess. Littlefinger constantly tries to use the squabblings of others to further his own agenda. I have to wonder if he's really thinking long-term here. He's seen Arya. He knows she could kill Sansa easily, and Arya doesn't trust Littlefinger, so why put himself in a possible situation where Sansa could be killed and he could just be taken out too? This makes no sense. Later, Sansa receives a summons from King's Landing, presumably for the meeting between Daenerys and Cersei, but why is one sent to Sansa? I mean, we know there's a chance Jon might not make it back, but Cersei shouldn't know that, so why send an additional letter? For intimidation, perhaps? To try to scare Sansa? Sansa tells Brienne she's sending her to represent her at King's Landing, but Brienne is worried about leaving Sansa alone with Littlefinger. Sansa gets irritated with her and dismisses her, telling her to head down to King's Landing, which she reluctantly does. Okay, so what was the point of doing that exactly? Either 1, she knows Brienne would stop her if she tried to do something to Arya, or 2, she's worried that Littlefinger bringing up Brienne is a bad thing and sends her away so she doesn't get pulled into one of his schemes. Not that Brienne is stupid, she's just easy to read, which is dangerous. This is so stupid! Brienne is the one person she should trust more than anyone. Even after everything Brienne went through for her, Sansa is still isolating herself. It seems like Littlefinger's teachings have truly changed Sansa. Finally, Sansa goes into Arya's room to try and find the letter, but instead finds a bag with the severed faces in it. Arya spooks her by stealthing into the room, and she demands to know what the masks are. Arya gives a brief explanation, but Sansa doesn't understand. Arya gets all creepy and wants to play the lying game with Sansa, but she'll have none of it, wanting a better explanation for the masks. Arya explains that with them she can become other people, live in their skin, and perhaps she could become like Sansa. She picks up the Valyrian dagger and makes it look like she's going to hurt Sansa, who stands defiant, but Arya relents and gives Sansa the dagger instead. She then walks out of the room without another word, leaving Sansa terrified. So, wow, this entire storyline was absolute garbage. There are hints of good storytelling poking through, like Arya wondering what it would be like to be Sansa, a callback to how she was always being compared to her sister when they were children. But man, this whole thing could easily be solved if they didn't just dismiss each other so easily. Say what you will about Littlefinger's involvement, they could have easily talked this out if they were both thinking clearly. Or if Bran actually did something useful, like say, "Oh yeah, I know everything Baelish did, he's evil, kill his ass." This is just drawn out and makes both characters look incompetent. Arya comes across as a rash, impulsive killing machine, while Sansa falls back into old habits and she knows are stupid, like talking to Littlefinger again. It's clear the writers don't know what to do with these two and have no idea how sisters work. I take a lot of this personally because I see a lot of similarities between Arya and Sansa's relationship and mine with my own sisters. We are total opposites, and while we don't hate each other, we just don't really spend a lot of time with one another because we are both in totally different worlds. However, despite this, I would go to the ends of the earth for her if I thought she was in danger, and I trust she would do the same for me. Considering all of the struggles these two have been through, physical abuse, mental abuse, homelessness, being on the run, rape, multiple near-death experiences, you think that petty squabbling and distrust would be left aside. There are so many machinations here when it comes to simple logic and understanding that even casual fans are upset with how these two are written. The showrunners haven't been doing so hot with conversations between women, particularly this season, now that they are working without George R. R. Martin's texts. I'm probably going to end up doing a whole video on this subject after this season finishes, or at the very least after the whole series concludes. Let me know if you would like me to work on this. So, the majority of the episode takes place beyond the Wall, with a few intermittent scenes at Dragonstone that directly follows that storyline. Beyond the Wall. A good chunk of this episode is conversations that take place between the various 7 characters as they traverse the land beyond the Wall. Tormund enjoys being back in the environment he grew up in, of course, while Gendry marvels considering he's never seen snow before. Tormund even brings up Mance, repeating a version of a line we've heard a bunch this season. How many men died for his pride? This show isn't good at subtlety. Also, why the heck is Tormund now going against Mance, the person he was previously super loyal to and willing to die for? Well, nice to see consistency is out the door for him, too. Jon and Jorah bond over their fathers, and Jon decides now, rather than at Eastwatch where he could have gotten another weapon, to try to give Longclaw back to Jorah. Jorah, while touched by Jon's kindness, says he isn't worthy and it should stay with Jon since Jeor gifted it to him. Well, since everyone seems to be just passing around priceless Valyrian weapons in the show, why not one more? Too bad House Mormont has now lost a valuable heirloom. Maybe Jon will give it to Lyanna or Jorah again after the battle with the White Walkers concludes. Occasionally, we do get some small character moments that I actually enjoyed, even though it's basically filler. The interactions with Tormund and the Hound are some of the more memorable parts of the episode. Seriously, can we just have the rest of the show be these two in like an odd couple sort of setup? That'd be great, thanks. Beric mentions how Jon doesn't look like Ned. Again, show, we already know that Jon isn't Ned's son. You don't need to keep mentioning it every fucking episode. Also, nice job removing that from his book counterpart. The fact that Jon looks like Ned is kind of important. It makes Arya and him feel close since they're the only ones who have the Stark features versus Tully features. And it's a constant reminder to Kat that Jon is supposedly Ned's bastard. We see Beric trying to give Jon some advice about being revived by a follower of R'hllor. He always wonders why he's brought back, but figures it's not something he needs to know about. Wish they had spent a bit more time with this talk. We really haven't seen any negative effects from Jon's resurrection, though admittedly in the books Beric says the first time it's not as noticeable that something's changed. Still, this could have been a good time to say something about that, but nah, instead he gives a speech about always fighting death even though it will inevitably win. The Hound says that the mountain they are approaching is the one he saw in the flames, which means they are getting close to finding the army of the dead. On Dragonstone, Dany and Tyrion chat by the fire. Dany invokes the audience by saying it's stupid how heroes charge into battle for bravery, mentioning Drogo, Daario, Jorah, and Jon Snow. Tyrion says they all have another thing in common. They all fell in love with Dany. Naturally, Dany denies this, while Tyrion insists that Jon stares at her longingly. Okay, guys, this is a television show. A visual medium. Show, don't tell. Having Davos and Tyrion tell us that Jon stares at Dany lovingly isn't going to make their sudden romance seem plausible. If anything, it points out how stupid it is. They were having a couple moments here and there, but not nearly to the staring longingly point. Come on, basic storytelling 101. They discuss the plan for the meeting at King's Landing. Naturally, both sides will be wary, and of course, Cersei will be planning some kind of trap. Tyrion tries to gently advise Dany to keep her cool, even if Cersei provokes her, which just pisses her off and she gets angry at him. He makes a dumb mistake by bringing up succession, which naturally is a touchy subject for Dany when she brings up that she cannot produce any children. This is the first time it's actually said in the show, though Dany kinda mentioned it once back in season 6 when she was captured by the Dothraki. Since it is suddenly getting brought back up again, my guess is this is going to serve as a plot point. Either her infertility will be a means by which she ends up losing support for the crown, or she's gonna have a miracle baby with Jon, because why not? That sounds cool. Back with the group, they end up running into a white bear, so we get this nice action piece for a bit, where a bunch of red shirts get attacked. After the bear is set aflame, it goes for the Hound, who gets scared due to a combination of fire and zombie bear. Thoros saves him, but ends up getting severely hurt as a result. Oh no, the healer is down! He can't exactly cast Revive on himself if he's dead! They use the flame sword to seal his wound and move on. Okay, while the idea of a white bear is cool, it's too bad the scene takes place in a snowstorm. It's so difficult to see what's going on, and while that explains how the bear sneaks up on them, it's just really hard to follow the action at times. Later, they conveniently find a small group of whites following a single White Walker, and decide to surprise attack them. When Jon kills the White Walker with his Valyrian blade, all the whites but one crumble. They guess that if the White Walker dies, all the whites that they turn back to corpses. This is a new rule for the show. This isn't something confirmed yet by George R.R. Martin. Also, conveniently, one white is left and they capture it, but not before it screams out. It's calling for help. Jon has Gendry run back to Eastwatch to send a raven to Daenerys, while Jon leads the others away as a distraction. Gendry leaves his hammer behind with them, which explains my guess last week about him being absent from the battle. Unfortunately, it seems they found a frozen lake which is beginning to crack. Jon and most of the group, sorry random wildling guy, make it to the small island in the center, and they soon find themselves surrounded by the army of the dead. The only thing preventing them from getting to them is the broken up ice. Gendry manages to get back to the wall by nightfall and tells Davos that they need to send a raven to Daenerys. Okay, how the heck did he make it back so fast? Were they seriously not that far from the wall? It looked like they had traveled quite a distance. Oh well, I'm sure it won't matter anyway. The next morning, the group wakes up, somehow not frostbitten except for Thoros, who had died sometime in the night. They burn his body so he isn't turned into a white. As they contemplate what to do, the Night King and several other White Walkers arrive. Somehow Beric knows that the Night King is the one who turned all of them, and to go after him specifically. Something they obviously aren't going to do this season. Guess it's up to Dany to save the day. Oh boy. We see she's gotten the message and plans to leave, despite Tyrion's insistence not to go. She is the reason they are fighting. If she dies, all is lost. Unfortunately, nothing Tyrion has done this season has worked. Not once has he been correct. King's Landing, Casterly Rock. He's been trying to apply logic to a fantastical situation. In any other circumstance, he would be in the right. But because Dany is the protagonist of the show, she's naturally going to be fine. Funny how just earlier she was making fun of Jon for making stupid, brave decisions. With her fancy new white outfit, she and the 3 dragons set off. Sometime later, the Hound is bored and throws rocks at the Whites. Unfortunately, one misses, and it shows that the ice has frozen over, and the Whites begin to close in on them, though a few at a time at first, building to more and more as the scene goes on. It gets intense as they are surrounded by more and more Whites, and they are starting to get overwhelmed despite being excellent fighters. Tormund is almost pulled into the water by some Whites, but gets saved by the Hound at the last second. I was genuinely worried there for a minute. Just as they are about to be overrun, for really reals this time, who should show up but Dany and her dragons? Are you kidding me? Condensing time is one thing, but blatantly ignoring time constraints altogether is stupid. As great as this whole sequence is, it's ultimately ruined by the fact that the build-up to it was absolute shit. This is the biggest tell that D&D don't know what they are doing. They have specific endpoints that they want to reach, but no way of effectively showing the journey to them. That's what makes them worthwhile. Ugh. Anyway, Dany has the group climb on Drogon, along with the captured White, while Jon fights off Whites attacking them. Unfortunately, the Night King grabs an ice javelin and hurls it at Viserion, killing him. We see this awful and heartbreaking scene of him falling into the water as he dies. Jon realizes that the Night King plans to attack the other dragons as well. Was this planned? And tells them to flee, but he gets dragged into the water by some Whites. Dany clearly doesn't want to go, but she has Drogon fly away, narrowly avoiding a second ice javelin throw. Not a big fan of how she looks more upset about losing Jon than one of her dragons. Ugh. After they fly off, Jon manages to pull himself out of freezing cold water despite it being 1. Really fucking cold, 2. Being dragged by Whites, and 3. The weight of his wet clothes would be massively heavy. Again, basic logic here that ruins the scene completely. As Jon prepares to fight one last time, he gets saved again, this time by Benjen. Yay! Unfortunately, no time for a reunion, so Benjen puts Jon on his horse and makes a last stand to give him time to get away. So Bran gets a touching reunion with backstory, while Jon, the one who admired Benjen, wondered about his fate for so long, only gets 10 seconds? Come on! At the wall, the Hound loads the White onto the ship, heading for King's Landing. Seems like Beric and Tormund are staying at Eastwatch. Odd that the Hound is heading to King's Landing. His purpose has been fulfilled going here, I guess. Oh no. Are they really gonna try to set up Clegane Bowl? Anyway, Dany and Jorah look sad, but then Jon shows up on the horse. Yay! On Dany's ship, Davos pulls off Jon's clothes. They are stuck good thanks to being frozen to him. She sees the scars from his betrayal as well as his killer abs. Nice. It's hard to say if she actually realizes that the wounds aren't from this battle. It doesn't get brought up here, but she has mentioned the taking a knife through the heart bit before, so maybe? Later, he wakes up to find Daenerys at his side. He apologizes to her and takes her hand, clearly trying to comfort her after the loss of one of her children. When he says he wishes he could take it back, she says no, she needed to see it, otherwise she never would have believed it. She then says that she wants to take down the Night King together with him. He calls her Dany, which is weird since how the heck would he know to call her that? After she mentions the last person to call her that was her brother, he instead calls her my queen, saying he will bend the knee to her. Oh, I bet Sansa and the others are gonna love that. The last scene of the episode shows the army of the dead using what looks like boat chains to pull Viserion's corpse out of the lake. I assume they got these from Hardhome? Added to the list of weird things that take you out of the scene. Also, how'd they wrap the chains around the dragon if they can't go in the water? And of course, the Night King uses his resurrection powers to revive Viserion into a white dragon. Oh no. So yeah, there are some really fantastic moments that happen in this episode. The budding friendship between the Hound and Tormund, the action sequences, and of course, Viserion being turned into a white. However, some really great moments cannot save a weak script. This episode was awful in certain parts. The entire Winterfell section was terribly paced and pretty much just a waste of time. You can tell the writers consider it the B-plot to the main story since nothing is accomplished. And even with the stuff beyond the wall, some shots were really difficult to see, like the White Bear encounter, and there's a ton of stuff that we have to suspend our disbelief about. Gendry making it back to the wall and sending the Raven, Dany getting the Raven in time and managing to fly over, Jon managing to pull himself out of the water, and the fact that no one other than Thoros in the group died. Odd how they're pulling a reverse. Normally we're surprised if characters we like die, but here it's a surprise if they somehow live. D&D even say that they write the episodes with these major story beats as the focus, which is really unfortunate because they aren't taking the time to really build up to them. We just have Winterfell, walking beyond the wall, Dragonstone, walking beyond the wall, Winterfell. The pacing sucks in this episode, and really dragged in certain spots. It was like you could tell they just really wanted to get to the action, and while that's great and all, we do like the build-up just as much, assuming it's decently written. The whole fight beyond the wall is also a stupid plan. Why not have Jon and Dany fly over on the dragon, see the army of the dead, and then peace out? Why bother involving Cersei at all if you're concentrating on fighting the army of the dead? Let Cersei have King's Landing for now. Be the hero that saves the realm from the others, and you'll have a much more powerful case for taking back the Iron Throne. Also, why did Gendry need to be the one to send the Raven? Why not have Bran use his green sight and have Vulcan send another Raven? It would explain the time problems, and Tyrion would look slightly less stupid warning Dany about going. Poor Tyrion is getting dumped on a lot this season. Why bother putting him in that position if he doesn't have anything good for it? I've already bitched about the awful writing that is the Sansa, Arya, Bran, Littlefinger plotline. I really hope this has some sort of satisfactory end that makes up for all this bullshit. Preview. Looks like Grey Worm is alive, yay! Him and the rest of the Unsullied seem to have left Casterly Rock, just like Jaime predicted. Next is a shot of the Greyjoy fleet parked in Blackwater Bay. We don't actually see Euron or Yara in the preview, which is interesting. Is Theon going to be able to rescue Yara this season, or is this going to be saved for Season 8? Varys, Tyrion, and Theon Greyjoy are on a ship, presumably approaching King's Landing for the meeting. Bronn and Jaime see the Unsullied army along with the Dothraki riders outside King's Landing. Seems like Dany is following Tyrion's advice about showing off her army's power. Then again, having the Greyjoy fleet parked in the bay is probably a similar show of power on Cersei's part. Then we see some dramatic shots of Sansa on the top of the Winterfell castle in the middle of a snowstorm. We can't see the wall clearly, so no confirmation on if Viserion is burning it down. Clearly Sansa has something planned, but what? Killing her sister? Killing Littlefinger? I really hope killing Littlefinger. This season showed that he's not worth keeping around anymore. Please, for the love of God, get rid of him. We then see a shot of someone on a beach. It looks like Theon, and by the way he drops to his knee, I'm guessing something bad has happened to Yara or Sansa. Oh no. After that, we see the meeting finally starting to take place at the Dragon Pit. A fitting place for a negotiation, considering it was used to house the Targaryen dragons, but has since fallen into ruin. So who is in attendance? One shot shows us Tyrion, Jon Snow, Davos, Podrick, Brienne, Jorah, and Theon. Wait, Sansa didn't specify that Podrick had to go with Brienne. I mean, she did complain about being treated like a child at the suggestion, but she never outright said not to do it. I'm rather surprised. Actually, wait, no, never mind. This is a season of reunions, so it makes sense that they're having Podrick reunite with Tyrion. And, of course, Cersei and Jaime. We didn't see a clear shot of Bronn, the Hound, the Mountain, or the White, but presumably they're there somewhere. The last shot is of Jon trying to convince presumably Cersei to unite since the only war worth fighting has already started, the dead versus the living. Jon is going to have one hell of a time convincing Cersei, especially when he finds out that she has a zombie of her own. So interesting. There's a lot of important folks missing from the trailer. No Dany at all, which is really odd, so maybe her entrance is really spoilery? Like I said before, no Yara or Euron, though since we see the Greyjoy fleet, Euron will have to make a quick appearance at the very least. No Arya or Littlefinger, most likely it's spoilery with regards to what has Sansa being dramatic at the top of the castle walls. No Bran. Oh, come on, he has to do something. He was already mentioning needing to tell Jon about his parentage. If he doesn't get to tell Jon directly, then perhaps he'll tell Sansa or Arya? And lastly, Sam, who should be heading to Winterfell for Jon. Maybe he will see Bran again and they can chat. Sam would probably relish the chance to talk with the human encyclopedia. Perhaps Bran will refer to the information Gilly found and use that as a means of proving Jon's heritage. So, what predictions do you have for the finale? Which plots do you think will actually get finished, and which will end up being pushed to Season 8? What will happen to Arya and Sansa? Will Bran get a chance to use his green sight again? How will the meeting go, considering all the characters present? Will Clegane Bowl be teased, since the Hound and the Mountain should both be there? And will the wall collapse, as I predicted, would happen at the end of this season? The Night King now has a dragon. It will be interesting to see if he still breathes fire, even if he's a zombie. Dragonfire is strong and has some magical properties to it, so perhaps it could be enough to break the enchantment keeping the whites out? Post your thoughts and comments below. I'm really curious to know if you were disappointed by this episode overall or not. Well, tune in next week for the last episode of Season 7. I'm Calluna, and thanks for watching. See ya! Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know I have a Patreon page. If you're not familiar with Patreon by now, it's a website that allows you to donate a small amount each month to your favorite content creators. You'll get a bunch of different rewards depending on the amount that you donate. Feel free to check out my page to see what kind of rewards that you can get by helping to donate. Every little bit helps, and helps to make this show even better, so wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. Thanks.
Geek Vision.